Good enough. Do this.
All right, so we're getting into partnerships. Okay, now with partnerships, what happens here, of course, is the fact that and a lot of times, lawyers, doctors, etc., form a partnership. Okay, and of course, the deal is it's a voluntary association. So what it means is 2 or more people voluntarily band together to form a business. The advantage, of course, is if you're a sole proprietorship, you're limited in the money you can raise to what one person can invest and one person can borrow. But when you form a partnership, suppose you got 2, 3, 4 people, well, then you can have, the resources of 2, 3, 4 people. Okay. When you have a partnership, there's something called, well, then you form it with a partnership agreement. And so with the partnership agreement, essentially what it is the best thing to do is to spell out everything that will affect the business, right? You can go down to Powell's and get a fill in the blank, fill out your own. You can do it on a handshake, that'll work. However, here's what Ben Franklin had to say about it. Now, he was in like 26 partnerships, and all of them ended amicably, right? They all went on well. Here's what he said. This is from his autobiography. It's the autobiography of Ben Franklin. So what it says is, my business was now continually augmenting, and my circumstances growing daily easier. My newspaper having become very popular was being for a time almost the only one in this and the neighboring provinces. I experienced too the truth of the observation that after getting the first £100, it is more easy to get the second, money itself being of a really prolific nature. The partnership Carolina having succeeded, I was encouraged to engage in others and to promote several of my workmen who behaved well by establishing them with printing houses in different colonies on the same terms with that in Carolina. Most of them did well, being enabled at the end of our term, 6 years, to purchase the types of me and go on working for themselves, by which means several families were raised. Partnerships often finish in quarrels, but I was happy in this, that mine were all carried on and ended amicably, owing, I think, a good deal to the precaution of having very explicitly settled in our articles everything to be done by or expected from each partner, so that there is nothing to dispute, which precaution I would therefore recommend to all who enter into partnerships. For whatever esteem partners may have for and confidence in each other at the time of the contract, little jealousies and disgust may arise with ideas of inequity in the care and burden of the business, etc., which are attended often with breach of friendship and of connection, perhaps with lawsuits and other disagreeable consequences. So what he's saying is, agree to everything, put it in writing before you actually open business. And that's the surest way to have a successful partnership. And it's easy to bargain these things before the business starts than when a problem arises. Okay? You can do it on a handshake if you want, but you're better off putting things in writing. It has limited life. Now this is easiest to see if 2 people go and form a partnership. 2 people form a partnership, one becomes incapacitated, there's no partnership, right? Now often what partners do is they take an insurance policy out on each other. And that way, if one dies, the insurance company pays off the heirs, the remaining partner becomes a sole proprietor. That's often how it's done. But just like a sole proprietorship, it has limited life. Taxation is not taxed. What it is the partnership fills out a Form 1034. It's for informational purposes only. It tells the IRS how much each of the partners is claiming of the net income. Okay, that's what they should put in their taxes. It has something called mutual agency. And what this says is any one of the partners acting in the name of the business binds the partnership. So whatever your partner says, buys, sells, whatever, then the whole partnership's obligated. So you gotta be able to trust your partner to use good sense. Co-ownership of property. So just like a sole proprietor, when a sole proprietor invests in the business, that money or goods or whatever is owned by the business. Well, the same is true. When each partner invests in the business, after the investment, that is owned by the partnership. Now, each partner has an equity in the partnership, but the asset is actually owned by the partnership. And it is unlimited liability. And so what this says is that each partner is responsible for all the debts of the business. So if two people form a partnership and the partnership goes out of business, each partner is responsible for all the debts of the business. All they got to do is go after one. Okay? All right. There's various kinds of partnerships. There's a limited partnership. And in this, it has at least one general partner. And then general partner has unlimited liability. And can manage. You have limited partners. And they have limited liability, but they can't manage. And it's kind of like it's kind of like incorporation in that the limited partner is an investor, and they invest in the business, but they can't manage. It's similar to buying shares, buying stock in a corporation. You buy stock in a corporation, and your liability is limited to what you have invested. If you own 1,000 shares of IBM, you have no say-so in the business, right? However, your losses are limited to that 1,000 shares. Okay, that's what a limited partnership is. But there's one general partner who runs the business and has unlimited liability. There's limited liability limited liability partnerships. Okay. Now, by the way, this is an LP. This is an LLP. Now, what this is, it insures against malpractice. So suppose two doctors form a limited liability partnership. One of the doctors screws up and is charged with malpractice. Well, the malpractice affects only that one partner, but they are responsible, but each partner is responsible for the debts of the business. Limited to one partner. However, all partners responsible for debts. Okay, so if one of the doctors malpractices, that doctor is subject to the malpractice suit. Okay, however, all the partners are equally responsible for all the debts of the business. Okay, all right, and then you have a limited liability company. Now, this was a limited liability company up until maybe 5 years ago, and now it's a limited liability corporation. It's the same type of business. And this has the limited liability of a corporation, but it's taxed like a partnership. So what happened here was, so it's limited liability company, right?
What do
Yeah.
you have written?
I'm sorry, what?
What do you have written?
What does that say?
Yeah.
This?
Yeah.
Well, it has the limited liability of a corporation, right? But it's taxed like a partnership. And of course, remember when a corporation has the double taxation in it? Okay, well, this is taxed one time. Okay, so with, you know, yeah, is everybody familiar with the double taxation? Okay, however, a limited liability company, you have the protection. Now, a couple things. What's unique about the limited liability company is it's a relatively new form of business. How you doing there, Gene? Is there still a mysterious
I
word?
can't see.
What, could you know, just standing up help?
Not really. I can't read it.
What's that?
I can't read it.
Oh, you mean that it's illegible?
Yeah.
Listen, read. All right, limited liability corporation, okay?
Okay.
All right, and then it's taxed like a partnership? Okay, all right. And thanks, okay,
Thank you.
all right. I'll slow down. Okay. Okay, all right. All right. Good. Everybody else doing good? All right. Good. All right. So let's do this. So the thing about this is so a lot of time, you know, a lot of books would have included this under corporation because it's really, because they see it as a form of corporation, not a partnership. The reason I think, of course, Weil put it here is because it's what it replaces partnerships. The thing about it is it's a relatively new thing, you know, less than 10 years old, 15, whatever. So if you have a sole proprietorship or a regular partnership, and you go to your attorney and say, if I do this, what will happen? Well, there's hundreds of years of case law, and your attorney says, this is what will happen. If you go in with this limited liability company, because it's so new, asking the same question, he or she may not know, just because there doesn't have that body of case law. Okay, so it's relatively new. And then, of course, it's somewhat complex. So they have the limited liability of a corporation. However, it's taxed one time as personal tax. It's taxed as though it's similar to a partnership, where you pass a certain portion of the income on to each owner, and they declare that in a 1040 and pay taxes on it accordingly. Okay. All right. Now, let's go ahead and organize a partnership. Don't forget, almost everything, most things that you learn on how to do a sole proprietorship will apply to a partnership. The only difference is there's more than one capital account. There's a capital account for each partner, and there's a withdrawal account for each partner. Other than that, it's pretty much the same. So let's go ahead and have an example here. So Zane and Hector form a partnership. Zane, Hector form a partnership. Okay? So Zane invests 7,000 cash. $33,000 in merchandise, in facilities. Now, Gene, this is still getting illegible, isn't it?
A little.
A little, all right.
Sorry.
Let me slow, no, I appreciate that. We'll make you the, what do they call it, a lightning rod or a bellwether or something? There isn't a name for a person who,
Whistleblower?
canary in the coal mine. There's a name for that, right? Whistleblower, canary. There's a name for that. What is it, bellwether, indicator? There's a name.
Weather vane.
The what?
The weather vane.
The weather vane. Yeah, the weather vane.
The
All right,
beacon.
we'll call you the weather vane. You tell which way the wind's blowing? There's got to be another name for that. The tripwire. All right. All right. Well, listen. So, Zane invested 7,000 cash, 7,000 in facilities. You're right. I see it is 33,000. Was that you, Mariah? Okay. By the way, did you guys know Mariah is Miss Clark County?
Oh, you
Nice
are?
job.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. So, you know, we're kind of like among royalty, I suppose, is the way you want to word it, right? All right. Well, now, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Nice job. All right. And a $10,000 note, okay? All right. Where Perez, well, let's make this Perez instead of Hector.
I like Hector anyway.
Thank you. All right.
Go home, Hector.
He invests 10,000 in cash. Okay? So here's what it looks like. So on January 11th is when they form the partnership. So you go to debit cash for 7,000. You're going, boarding facilities is this one, so facilities. That's an account name, okay, is debited for 33,000. You have a note payable of 10,000. That means that 30,000 will be Zane Common Capital. Okay, so now the partnership owns this cash, owns this facility, and has assumed this liability. And this is how much equity Zane has in the partnership. And this is January 11th. And then on January 11th, we'll take it, so now we have cash will be debited for 10,000. And Perez Common Capital will be credited for 10,000. And so this is the initial investment in the business, okay? Is that a hand up?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so Zane invested 40,000 total with 7,000 cash and 33 facilities. Why is Zane's capital only 30,000?
Because these facilities came with a $10,000 note.
Okay, so then 23,000 would be the part, or that portion of the capital, and then 7,000 cash. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And so the equity that he has in the business is 30,000. Because it would really be a $23,000.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Okay, let's do this. Let's do exercise 12-3. You'll find that on page 498. Let me put it up here. I'll move this forward.
Which one?
What's that?
Sorry, I'm still on.
Right here, exercise 12-3, page 498. Oh, by the way, guys, this door's unlocked. If you open it, you've got to re-yank the darn thing. So, yeah. All right. So 498. Here's how it reads, exercise 12-3. So here's how it reads. All right. Anita Kroll and Aaron Rogers organized a partnership January 1st. Kroll's initial net investment is $60,000, consisting of cash 14, equipment 66, and a note payable reflecting a blank loan for the new business of $20,000. Rogers' initial investment is $25,000. These amounts are values agreed on by both partners, prepared the journal entries to record the two investments. I'm gonna step past you here. Thank you. Here, John, you know. I'm sorry, can I pass it? Thank you much. If I could pass it, Pastor. Hi, where did the roll end up? There it is. All right. So, thank you very much. All right. Here you go. Everybody else get the roll? All right.
I'm not understanding this.
Okay. What would you like? Okay. There's a bunch of parts here. Let me put this up here. And can you, so, let me kind of set it a little better. So what's happening here now is, so on the first one, Kroll, that's the name. What he's doing now is he's investing cash in the business, $14,000. And then there's equipment, but the equipment has a $20,000 note. So the equipment has a market value of 66, but it's really only worth 46 because it comes with this much debt. So if you have 14,000 in cash, 46 in equipment because the note, then his equity is 60.
Okay.
Now, and of course, this is the same question. What your?
This is Jesse.
Jesse, this is the same question that Jesse had, so you're not alone in asking it. Okay.
And what was the question? I didn't.
Well, Jesse, okay, it's the idea that in this case, this Kroll, now he invests, and it's how do all the numbers add up? Now, there's a couple ways you can do it, and Michael, I'll see if I can kind of answer that as we go along here. How do they? So you're wondering how they get the 60,000? Now, one thing you can do is treat it as though we're a plug figure. So if you have these two debits, this credit, it has to be this amount for it to balance. That's one way of doing it.
Okay.
Another way of doing it is, and of course, Michael, that's kind of the question, how do they get the 60,000 in the A. Kroll capital? Okay. The other thing is 14, and then this is really a 66,000. Now that's the agreed on market value minus what's still owed on it. So 66 minus 20 is 46. So this should be 46 instead of 66. So 14 plus 46 is 60. I hope I'm clear on it. Does that make more sense, Addie?
So the total business, their total capital is 85,000.
Yes.
Combining the
Okay,
two.
gotcha, exactly.
Combined.
So the total business is worth 85, because Rogers invested 25, and Kroll invested 60. And so between the two of them, the total equity in the business is 65, okay? And the reason this is 60 is because it had a $20,000 debt. And I sure appreciate your question, and, you know, other people had it too, so. Yeah, Michael.
So Steve, is it wrong then when you're looking at the question, because it says, you know, Kroll's initial investment is 60K.
Mhm.
So you know that's a given, you know that there's a note payable for 20.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that the same, or is it always going to be a matter of plug and go?
Actually, but what they did is this book was pretty clever. What they did is they said the investment is 60, and here's what the investment consisted of. It consisted of these two assets and that note. So that over here they stated. Yeah, Weil does a good job in that.
So if you follow the question, I mean, because it almost appears like it's trying to trick you into thinking something differently, because you got a $60,000 cash invest or initial investment, which consists of 14,000 and 66,000.
Plus a
So-
note for 20.
And so it kind of creates this skew where it's like, oh wait, you know, are you second guessing? But in reality, you just have to know that the note is going to always be a credit. You know the investment is going to be a credit, and then
I'm sorry, Mike, you must have meant it.
the 60K investment.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have your cash and equipment, which are debits.
Yeah, Justin?
So did you buy part of the equipment with the note? That, okay.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So Here's how this probably played out. He bought the equipment, and it came with a note. So at the time that A. Kroll invested it, there was $20,000 left in the note, and the current market value of the equipment was $66,000. So here's the current market value of the equipment at the time of the investment, and here's how much was left to pay off. So the book value would be 66 minus 20, or 46. Very good. Can I check with you guys? How you doing on this? Thank you very much for your question. Okay. All right, you guys are okay with that. Now, let's get on to, let's see, how should I do this? This is kind of, excuse me just a second, make sure I don't step in here. I'm going to turn this over here, and let's get into dividing up the income. Okay, now, what we're doing on this next thing is, let me kind of lay it out schematically. Okay, so what's happening here is that, do you remember when we had a sole proprietorship? You had revenue, so this is closing. You had revenue, you have expense, you have income summary, and then you have your capital. And then you close the revenue to income summary, you close the expense to income summary, then you close the net income to capital. And you also close the withdrawals. Okay? So when you closed, and it was a sole proprietorship, right? You closed the revenue to income summary, you closed the expense to income summary, that gave you the net income, and then you closed that net income or net loss to the capital account. You also closed the withdrawals to the capital account. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
Now we're going to do the same thing, but what's a little different is the fact that there'll be more than one capital account. There'll be more than one capital account. You know, in the way I should word that, there'll be a capital account for each partner. Maybe a better way of wording it. But I don't think I write that down so we can move along. Okay. But there'll be a capital, so there'll be more than one capital account, there'll be one for each partner, right? And when you divvy it up on this basis. It's as though they have a salary or a return on their investment. Okay, or stated ratio. So it's important to realize here is the fact that when they use the words on the salary basis, there's not actually a salary. They're saying is, let's divvy this net income as though these people were receiving a salary, and that'll compensate them for putting in their time. Yeah.
So the split starts at net income.
The split starts at net income. Exactly. And here's how they make the split.
Okay.
They divvy it up as though they were receiving a salary. As though they were receiving a return on their investment. Or maybe just a stated ratio. Okay? Now they don't really receive a salary because that would be an expense, and it's not here, it's here. Okay, so it's not here. It's a return on their investment. That would also be an expense, but it doesn't occur here, it occurs here. So they divide it up as though they were a salary, as though it was a return on their investment, or perhaps a stated ratio. Okay? But it's so important to realize we're not talking about a salary expense, we're not talking about a interest expense, etc. We're just dividing it up among the various capital accounts this way. Okay? Yeah.
You said earlier they have their own withdrawal accounts?
And they all have their, everybody, each partner has their own capital account and their own corresponding withdrawal account.
And
Okay?
how does that affect their, whatever they're getting, their return on investment?
Well, actually, this one doesn't, okay? So what happens here is you get the net income, right? And part of that net income is transferred to each capital account, okay? And then each capital account gets their withdrawals, and that will give the ending balance in each capital account, okay? And then this is the basis for dividing this net income up between or among, depending whether there's two or more capital accounts. It's done on this basis. So for instance, what you can have here is one person can put in the money, another person can put in the time. So if that's the case, the person who put in the time will receive the equivalent of a salary, $50,000 a year. The person who put in all the money will receive a 10% return, as though they received a 10% return on the investment. What's left over is divided equally. So the person who put in the money gets a return, gets part of it as though it were a return on the investment. The person who gets puts in all the time will get something as though it were a salary. And then what's left over of the net income that's not accounted for these two is divided equally, for instance. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Now, with that introduction, let's kind of go into this. So let's start with, so in this case, the partnership agreement says that Zane will take 2/3 of the net income, and Perez will get 1/3. Okay, and the net income is $60,000. Well, 2/3 of 60 is 40. So the way that works is, so on December 31st, they do the closing. When you do the closing, income summary will be debited for $60,000. Because if it's a net income, right, if it's a net income, then that means it has a credit balance of $60,000. Does that sound about right? Okay. And then you have Zane, comma, capital. Now Zane gets 2/3 of the net income, so Zane will get 40. And then you have Perez, comma, capital. He gets 1/3, he or she gets 1/3, and 1/3 of 60 is 20. So what you're doing is you're getting the net income, you're transferring it to the capital accounts on the basis of a stated ratio. In this case, this is what they agreed to in their partnership agreement. Right.
That's the step of getting rid of the income summary. Right?
Yeah, it could be getting rid of, what I would say, it transfers the net income, because what the income summary does now is it finds the net income or net loss.
Yes.
And then, the next step in the closing process, after you find the net income or net loss, is to transfer to the capital. Now, in last time, there was one capital account as a sole proprietorship. Now it's two capital accounts, and so this net income is then transferred. Okay? And this is what's called stated ratio. Now, if the partnership agreement is silent as to the ratio, it's divided equally. Okay? So if the partnership agreement is silent, and I'm going to make that more legible before Jean says something. And Jean, this is meant kindly. It is okay if I kid you, right?
Yeah.
Because it is meant kindly, so if it feels anything else, give a yell. I won't say it anymore. Because I do appreciate your input, because, no. Okay. The partnership agreement, silent, divide equally. Okay? Now, So in this case, the partnership agreement said 2/3 and 1/3, right? So that's what we did. Whatever the partnership agreement says, that's what you do. If the partnership agreement says nothing about it, then you divide equally. Now, how do you know this? Where did this come from? Like on high? Well, there's a thing called the Uniform Partnership Act. And the Uniform Partnership Act is adopted by almost all the states. And the Uniform Partnership Act, which is adopted by it's adopted by the states. It says that if nothing's said about how to divide up the net income, it's divided equally. Now, this uniform partnership, it is adopted by almost all the states. There is some variation among states. For instance, Louisiana didn't adopt it. And the reason is because Louisiana, their history and much of their state law is based on French law, and the rest of us are based on English law. And I guess they're very different. I guess, one thing that English law has is we're all innocent until proven guilty. That's where we got it. French law doesn't have that concept. Okay, and I'm not sure how it works. I don't know if you have to prove your innocence or what the deal is, but all I mean to say is there's some real fundamental differences in the two. So, but most states follow the Uniform Partnership Act, and that's where it says, if nothing's said about how to divide up, it's equal. Okay?
A question.
Yeah.
So that split 2/3 and 1/3, is that temporary, or till each partner got a return on his initial investment? Because after 2 years here, both partners will get a return on their initial investment, but then if they continue this way, Zane will be making double for the rest of his life?
Yep.
That's what they're doing.
Well, and again, the answer to your question is, whatever the Uniform Partnership Act says, that's what you do. And if this is what the Uniform Partnership Act says, that's what we do. Now, the deal is, I think they're just presenting an example, because in reality, it's hard to believe that Perez would agree to something like this. Unless, now, the way that can work though is, for instance, you can have, maybe Zane is a celebrity, and what Zane says is, I'll lend my name to the business. People will think, and so, but I'm really a famous guy, right? I've been on the reality TV shows and all that. And so, without me, this partnership is going to go belly up. With me, we can sell a lot of these things. But my name ain't cheap. So, I want 2/3 of the net income. You take 1/3 of the net income, and we'll we'll use my name to promote this business. So, under those circumstances, it may be a good deal for Perez. And again, I'm just using that as an example. But the best answer to your question is, if this is what the Partnership Act says, this is what we do. Okay, and that may be a circumstances where somebody would agree to something like that. Yeah.
Could Perez technically say, well, I'll only agree to this for a certain term,
Sure.
2 to 5 years, and then after 5 years, we have to resubmit another contract? So it
Sure.
is possible to change the
Sure.
contract.
It's a contract. And it's a contract that you can really say anything you want. It's whatever the two parties agree to.
That's why it's best to have it in writing.
And later on, I'll show you, there's some consequences you just wouldn't expect. And I'll show you, I'll point those out later. That, like what happens when there's a net loss. If this was a net loss, then Perez does better. Yeah.
So for this 2/3, 1/3, is that like you'd write that in the Uniform Partnership Act?
The uniform, here's the
What is
deal.
that?
Yeah, what it is this is a set of laws. And if they're adopted by the state where your partnership is formed, then they govern your partnership. They're a set of laws. Okay? And one thing, and so the partnership, the partnership agreement, which is the contract between in this case there's two people, says that when, at the end of the year, we take the net income, Zane gets 2/3, Perez gets 1/3, and that's in the agreement.
Okay.
Now, these set of laws, which are adopted by the state of Washington, what it says is if nothing is said in the partnership agreement, then it's divided equally. It also says that if it only states what you do with income, and it says nothing about losses, then losses are divided in the same way that net income would have been divided. So suppose the partnership agreement says net income 2/3 goes to Zane, 1/3 goes to Perez. It's silent as to losses. Then 2/3 of the loss, if there was a loss, 2/3 would go to Zane and 1/3 would go to, and of course what the loss would do is it would reduce the capital accounts. Yeah. And that's kind of what we're talking about. You got to consider, so this could be one of those unintended consequences because Zane didn't think it through. All right, now, here's another way of doing it. You can also do it allocation on capital balances. Now what will happen is we'll go through this stated ratio, etc., and then at some point in time, we'll show you how they can be linked together. So here we have Zane, okay? And Zane has 30,000 invested, right? Okay? And Perez has 10,000 invested. So the total equity is 40,000. Okay? Now, what this says, so now, 30 over 40 is 75%. 10 over 40 is 25%. Okay? So see where I'm getting 75%?
Yeah.
So it's 30 over 40, so the total equity is 40. 30 belongs to Zane, so this is 3/4, 1/4. And then we multiply that times the 60,000. And so Zane, under these circumstances, will get 45,000, and Perez would get 15,000. Add them together, and the full 60,000 is accounted. So, in this case, it's divided up according to the capital balances. So it's allocated on the capital balances. Here's the capital balances, here's the total capital. And because Zane has 3/4 of it, he or she gets 3/4 of the net income. Perez has 1/4, so Perez gets 1/4. Okay? All right. Now, what happens here is, let's kind of go on to another one. So now let's link them together. So now what we're going to do is we're going to divide this net income. So we divide it up by a stated ratio based on the capital balances. Now let's link them together where it's done in both. So what happens here now is the net income is 70,000 in this example. Okay? And the partnership agreement, so here we have Zane. And Jean, did you notice that sometimes they spell Zane differently?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, yeah. So I just thought, yeah, okay. And it just keeps people on their toes, okay? Because people are thinking, anyway, so listen, here's the deal, and there's the net income. So this particular partnership agreement says, listen, Zane puts in more time than Perez. So we'll say that he gets 36,000 as though it's a salary, and Perez will get 24,000 as though it were a salary, and this leaves 10,000 left. Okay? So, and again, all it's, and of course Zane just puts in more time. Okay? So we're going to first dividing it up as though it were a salary. Then they get an interest, 10%. So 10% of the 30,000 is 3,000. 10% of the 10,000 is 1,000. Now this means that there's 6,000 left, and then the remainder is divided equally. So half of this is 3,000, half of that is 3,000, and 6,000. So now there's none left. And I think I'll just leave that blank, or maybe put a 0. There's none left. Okay? Now, what happened here is, so the total credit to Zane's capital account will be 36,000 plus 3 plus 3. So his or her account will be credited with 42,000. 24 plus 1 plus 3. So Perez's account will be credited for 28. And so here you have the $70,000 net income. It's divided up in this manner, that everybody gets, each of them get, each of them get a salary. Because Zane puts in more time, he gets a greater salary. Okay, and it's not an expense, right? It's not an expense, but rather it's an agreed way to divvy up the net income. Then they get a return of 10% on their investment. Okay, 10% of 30,000, 10% of 10,000. And what's left over is then divided equally. Okay? So this will be a credit to Zane Common Capital, credit to Perez Common Capital. Yeah, Mariah.
I'm sorry, I must have missed this. Where did the 3,000 and 1,000 come from? Were those given?
They were, what the contract says is that here's the salaries, everybody gets a 10% return on their investment,
Okay.
and then what's left over is divided equally, and that's just what the contract says.
I missed the from the investment. I thought it was from the 36,000.
No, it's from the initial investment. And again, what happens, so what they're doing here is, the way this is set up, they're rewarding for time put in, they're rewarding for investments, is how it's set up, which seems fair to me. Okay. All right. Now, so let's do this. Now let's do another one very similar. So in this case, instead of having a $70,000 net income, let's say the agreement said the same thing. The agreement said each of the people get this salaries, each get a 10% return on their investment. What's left over is divided equally, right? Now, suppose instead of a net income of 70, let's say we have a net income of 50. Okay? So now, first there's the salary. And so it's 36 and 24. Just as it was before. Okay? So now, there's a deficit of 10. Okay?